all the unique characters.
I do let him bang. Yeah, I'm a legend, man. I'm building my legs.
All the stories and perspectives featured weekly.
I wasn't fully committed to that choke, and I kind of sunk into it, started squeezing tighter, and I kind of heard him gurgle a little bit. I was like, oh.
And all the combat sports you could ask for in the best state in the U.S.
Like I said, Ohio versus the world. It's going to happen for sure. Watch out.
It'll be cool, man. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to show them why the Ohio MMA scene is, in my opinion, one of the best MMA scenes in the country.
This is Forged in OH.
I-O.
OH.
I-O.
OH.
I-O.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the week of 100 episodes for Forged in Ohio. This is the third of 5 episodes to be released this week to celebrate the 100 episode milestone of the show. And since we're in the middle of the week, I thought I'd offer something different for this one. Today, I'll be joined by one of my closest friends, someone I've worked with in some fashion for the last 4 years or so. Without him, I think it's safe to say that Forged in Ohio wouldn't exist, because I like to say that we fueled each other's passion for combat sports. He's the voice of Cage Thunder and the co-matchmaker of the promotion as well. It is Alex Henry. Thanks for coming on the show, Alex, and welcome on in to Forged in Ohio's week of 100 episodes.
Thank you, Jake. It's always, I'll say it every time, don't care if it's cringe. It's always an honor when I get to share a microphone with you, and I mean that.
Man, I share the same sentiment, and you know that as well. When we share the same microphone, magic happens, and it's happened over the last 4 years or so, like I mentioned. And for those of you that don't know, Alex did play a big role in the early stages of this podcast, of Forged in Ohio. How would you say that we kind of got each other to where we are today in a way with our passion for combat sports?
Yeah, in terms of reigniting each other, and well, I don't even know if I reignited you, but you reignited me. I wrestled, and on the wrestling team in high school, a lot of the kids watched UFC. I like to watch it with them, just to be involved with the team and do team activities and kind of stuff like that. I liked it. Wasn't a huge fan of the UFC until I got into WZIP 88.1 FM, the best college radio station out there. You were the sports director. I was going through my training with you, and you asked, hey, would you want to do UFC podcast? And me, at the time, not really knowing crap of what I was about to talk about on this podcast, said yes. And from there, it was just a ball rolling. But in terms of how I think I helped you, it's so tough to say. Obviously, we're taking podcasting class, and this all started as just a little independent class project to now, but there's so many ways, from just logo. I remember you were like, how do you like this? And it's one of my favorite stories to tell people. And I was like, I would do it like this. And I was pooping, and I took a black picture on Instagram, and I used the draw tool, and I drew it, and I sent it to you, and I said, I would do it like this. I know it's a rough copy. I'm using the restroom. And that's pretty much still kind of the outline, with some minor differences over the, period of the show of that graphic, which I like. So, yeah, a lot of fun stuff.
I don't even think I knew the backstory of that, but thanks for sharing that here on the offset of episode 100, one of the many episodes 100s of Forged in Ohio here. But yeah, I think that was the graphic of, I think it was Aaron Bush. He was like the 5th or so episode, and I was trying to create a graphic of these pictures of the fighters themselves, and you were much more talented at the time. You still are with graphic design and things like that with Photoshop, and that first draft I sent you was pretty rough, and now here we are with the 3-picture template that I have that you also had a big picture with. And when it came to starting the show, you helped a lot with some of the guests as well, from episodes 1 through 10 especially. And I hope this is the last self-serving question I ask, because this episode is about you. But when Forged in Ohio was just an idea at the University of Akron, at WZIP, did you ever think it would be where it is today now at 100 episodes? Because I don't know if I would have.
Jake, no, I would not. I would not. I'm sorry, you're my bro, but I just don't think so. Not that I ever lacked confidence in your preparation and your scheduling, because I think that's honestly probably the two things that you do best to maintain the show. I just didn't. I thought you would get burnt out. I don't know. And it's just such a unique community, Ohio MMA is. And I think a lot of people in media within Ohio MMA feel that burnout and they're done. And I figured, it was just a class project, but you really took it and ran with it. So no, and now at 100 episodes, it's like, this is awesome. So I'm very proud and I'm happy I could be a part of it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I did not think 100 episodes, and I honestly just along the way just churning out episodes, and here we are already at 100 episodes, which is just a crazy milestone that I didn't really know was possible. And in terms of burnout, like, man, I have definitely had weeks where it's like, all right, I just put in 8 hours into this episode, but crap, I have another one next Monday that I have to do all the research and find a guest for on short notice and all those types of things. But I think you can speak to this too, just burnout within Ohio MMA, like, it's the fighters, man. When I do an episode like this and I have a bomb guest who thanks me for having them on, and he talks about what I've contributed to Ohio MMA and everything like that, man, it makes you feel like you're actually making a difference. And burnout at that point is in the rearview mirror, and I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
It is difficult because and you've worked with the pros and you see how they're a little more professional. But, with these amateur guys, what we do is we're trying to give them a platform. We want to give them a platform. We want to give them an audience because that's important to become successful in MMA now. And the lack of respect you get from it sometimes to trying to platform somebody who otherwise wouldn't have that platform, yeah, it definitely creates a burnout. So, and I know you've had episodes like that, I'm sure, where you're like, this guy came on and didn't do anything, but, and I've had that too. So yeah, it's cool that you kept with it. Now I could never see you not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we're 100 episodes in. Why stop here, right? We're just going to keep on
Right.
turning them along. So let's dig into your background here. You mentioned wrestling in high school and everything, and then getting into MMA at WZIP. I'm not sure if you'll know the answer, but for me, it was Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier 3. And I've, of course, gone back to watch a ton of UFC fights, a ton of classics. But do you remember the first MMA fight that you ever watched?
Oh, no, it's not the first one that comes, not the first one I watched, but the first one that my earliest memory was McGregor Poirier 2 would be my youngest memory. But I couldn't tell you the first one I watched.
Yeah, I know you're also a big pro wrestling fan. Who were some guys that you maybe idolized growing up and potentially influenced the Alex Henry that we all know and love today?
Well, my favorite wrestler growing up was The Undertaker. Honestly, not a lot of correlation between me and The Undertaker. I guess, the word aura gets thrown around a lot, and I just loved his aura and that character that he had. Here's one. My second favorite would have probably been Jeff Hardy. I like Jeff Hardy because he was a risk taker. He'd go up to the top of the ladder. He don't care. He's jumping. Off his cage, jumping. Doesn't matter. And that risk taker that Jeff Hardy had, I can kind of relate to that because I've always looked at myself as a risk taker. And maybe I've never thought about it like that until just now saying it, but certainly can draw some inspiration from that. Not only that, but those are two wrestlers who also have a lot of theatrics within their gimmick. And I think that I, to an extent, in a different way from what I get to do, sort do what I can to have theatrics. When you met me in college radio, I had a permed, bleached mullet, and that was a persona, and it helped. I got a radio job in 2 months of working how to use this, knowing how to use a soundboard. So I guess that persona factor, from those two guys kind of helped too. They were my biggest wrestlers that I was fans of growing up.
What was it that kind of locked you into combat sports that sparked your interest in MMA?
That's a good one too. I just remember having like a lot of respect for the sport, even when I would watch it back in the wrestling days. And I'm like sick in the head where I'm addicted to combat. Any kind of combat I love. And I'm not a violent person. Matter of fact, any of my wrestling coaches who might be listening to this, their biggest critique of me would always be, Henry, you got to get mad, get fired up. He said something about your mom. He hates. And I'm like, I'm not mad at him though. But there's something about the art of violence and watching it take place, and then the respect after, that I really love. So all that to say, Jacob Bostic was my wrestling coach, one of them, and he did mixed martial arts. And I wasn't that good at wrestling, but I'm a good talker. And I would troll him all the time because I would find his Tapology, which I didn't know back then would be my most used website I use every single day. And I would find the guys that he had lost to, and I would just like whisper it in his ear every now and then. And then I would really watch Jacob's fights though. And then getting in to college radio, now we're watching, it was Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane. That was the pay-per-view was our first ever podcast that we did. And I studied the card so much, and I was watching Francis Ngannou highlights, trying to watch his old fights and do research, and probably some of the best research I've ever done. It's like been like a steady decline since, but I was really just so anxious, and watching him fight, I'd never been more excited for a card ever at that point. So those are like two things that really watching it kind of sparked it. And yeah, like I said, it's something in my neurology where I'm just like, I just want to watch people fight. I don't know.
I love how you described it as like the arts of violence, mixed martial arts, right? And I'm not an inherently violent person too. You know that. I know that you're not either. Do you have like a perfect example of like something that was violent, but it was artistic to you watching MMA that you just loved?
Yeah, Cody Garbrandt's one of my favorite fighters of all time. When I was getting into it in high school, I always wanted to watch Cody Garbrandt. And that was like Dillashaw phase, which wasn't like the best time to be. Well, really, there hasn't been a good time to be a Garbrandt fan in like 6 years. But I just liked him because he was from Ohio, much as you with Stipe Miocic. And I was watching his fight with Dominic Cruz on YouTube, where he's just like the best fighter in MMA of all time for like 25 minutes. And it really is an art how he could bob, weave, and still land a shot, still showboat on him and land a shot. And it was violent. It absolutely was. And it was an art because he was so good at his craft that he was able to taunt. He was able to play with his food. And his food was on his way to becoming the greatest bantamweight of all time. So I would definitely say that's the first one I can really think of where I was like, this is more than just guys going out and knocking each other out. or choking each other out.
Yeah, that's a great example. For you, was there a moment when you realized that you wanted to take your fandom and love for this sport to the next level by actually working in it and working in mixed martial arts?
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to tell this story. This is so cool. I had interviewed Josh Roller. And he was a fighter that, if you're a Fortune Ohio fan, you should know who Josh Roller is. And if you're an Ohio MMA fan, you know who he is. And I'd interviewed him. And now that was so fun. I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to interview another fighter. And I, through a loophole of loopholes, was able to interview Terrence McKinney, which was at the time hot in the UFC as a prospect. Most people still probably know, if you're a UFC fan, know who Terrence McKinney is because of how hot of a prospect he was. And I was able to secure an interview with him. It's not a great interview, but when I got to do it, I was so excited that I'm like, I want to do this and I want to give it a shot because I knew I wanted to do media. So here I am. This is the story I've always wanted to tell. I'm in English composition, whatever it is, 999. I don't know. And I'm so bored. I'm not in school anymore, so I can say this. This teacher was so boring. Professor, awful. Okay? And I'm so bored. And I'm done with like all my work. She was like the type to be like, all right, just work on your essay for the next hour and a half. Well, you know what? No, I'm not working on my essay for an hour and a half. I'm looking at fighting on my laptop because I just interviewed Terrence McKinney. And I'm like, man, Jacob Bostic, he's going to fight for Cage Thunder. My old wrestling coach is going to fight for Cage Thunder. I want to go to a Cage Thunder show. Actually, scratch that. I want to see if Cage Thunder will let me work for them. So back in the day, I don't know if it's like the same word, but Randy Jarvis's email was on the Facebook. And I'm like, you know what? I have a decent resume of interviewing fighters. I do think I have that charismatic energy. I'm a media person. I'm going to email him and see if I can't do anything. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm just like, hey, you got something I can do? Can I, punch tickets at the door? I don't know anything. And he responded within the day, sent me to Norm Carrero, said, you know what? He's our media guy. You have good media background. Talk to him. And if you know Norm, he is an intimidating guy. He's jacked. At the time, he's an active fighter. He's got tats. He's a military vet. The dude's scary. Not the kind of guy you want to, be the dad if you're going to, like, go on a date with a daughter and then you find out Norm's the dad and you're like, oh, crap, that's Norm. And for whatever reason, Norm took a shot on me. Norm's like, you know what? Yeah, come interview the fighters. We have nobody to do it anymore because I'm working on pay-per-view. It's going to be free. You're going to do it for free. You can watch a show, but you're going to do it for free. I said, okay. So I went into interviews that day with like 6 questions to ask every fighter. And that was it. And yeah, that was kind of it. It was just, if it wasn't for that professor being so boring and me coming off a high of UFC podcast and interviewing Terrence McKinney, I don't know if I would have ever been in Cage Thunder. So that was kind of what made me want to get into, MMA media.
Had you ever heard of Cage Thunder before seeing that Jacob Bostic, your old wrestling coach, was actually fighting for the promotion at that time?
No, never heard of it.
And when you work that first event, Norm takes a chance on you, and you have 6 questions for every fighter. I'm sure you were nervous. After you did those interviews, were you like, yes, this is the place for me. This is what I want to do?
I was nervous as all heck. I really was very nervous. And I didn't know if they would like it. And I remember some of the fighters were kind of like, they would pick on me. Not like in a mean way. They're fighters. That's how they are. And a story I like to tell is Drew Schottenheimer. I went to interview him, and I asked him, and this is my first time ever, interviewing these guys. I said, hey, how have you been preparing for this fight? And he said, drugs, lots of meth. I didn't know what to do. The camera's still recording. Nobody's stopping. And I just off the top of my head, I said, well, it was something along the lines of like, are you going to take any drugs going into tonight's bout? And he said, like, no, I'm not, but I'll probably drink like a bunch of caffeine. And that right there, I think might have even got it, because Norm and Drew kind of had a relationship. And when I did that, it kind of showed to them, this kid, he can go off the fly, and he's not afraid of this big fighter that could kick his butt. So let's give him another shot. He's gonna do it for free anyway, which is true. And so I did it, and I think from there on, I don't think they've hated too many interviews. So.
Talking with Alex Henry here on Forged in Ohio. I've heard you say time and time again that closed mouths don't get fed, and that's exactly what you did getting your opportunity in Cage Thunder. Do you remember what the first event you called for was for the promotion when you finally got to crack that mic and actually be on a broadcast on a pay-per-view?
First time I ever was on a pay-per-view, I believe, was Cage Thunder 18. My first one was Cage Thunder 15, where I was just interviewing. And for 3 shows, that's all I did. And actually, something cool they used to do is they would take my interview, not only post it on the internet to promote the fighter and sell tickets, but they would actually show it on the pay-per-view because we didn't have commentating. So during the entrances, they would show the interviews. And I thought that was really cool. But first time I ever commentated was Cage Thunder 18. I knew it was happening. It was with Cody Anthony. I don't remember anybody who fought that night. I couldn't tell you.
So that was Cage Thunder 15. I know that wasn't the first pay-per-view, but that was the first event that you actually had to call. Now we're approaching Cage Thunder 29 coming up in December. And that's just the numbered cards, let alone the next gen and some of the other ones that are mostly amateur fights. Does it feel like you've called 15 plus Cage Thunder events by now?
No, it doesn't. I feel like I'm still at the beginning. Like, it doesn't seem like it's been over 2 years, but it has been. And honestly, it's weird because I'm at a point where I've been commentating way more than I was just doing interviews, but it feels like it's still like 50-50, which is crazy because it's been over a year and a half since like that was the case. It's been like over 2 years. So yeah, it's definitely kind of still surreal. A lot of people want to be commentators really bad, and to think that I get to do it, I'm still like, it's still unreal to me every show that I get to do it.
Yeah, so I know you have those 2-3 years under your belt, but do you ever hear calls from the first couple of events that you did and maybe cringe a little knowing how much better you are today at the job?
I think I did some good things early on. When I first started, I really just stayed in my role. I am color. I'm going to do a lot of research on these fighters and provide a good color. And I'm happy I did that because early on, I had a lot of struggles with having good guest commentators or a good second commentator or a good third commentator. Because at the time, it was anybody who was a fighter and whoever the promotion wanted. They're like, oh, you're a fighter? You can comment. You want to commentate? Oh, you do? Okay, go ahead. This kid, he's never fought in his life. He's 20 years old. He needs the help. And true to an extent, but I cared so much about commentating and doing my role that I think now in MMA commentary, play-by-play and color is not the same in any other sports. There's a lot of crossover throughout the entire broadcast, and I got so good at color that I know when to pick my spots in other spots now, which is comforting because in terms of a lot of understanding the game of MMA, I know a lot more now than I did back then. But yeah, I'm sure I said some cringy things. I remember Cody Anthony, who was the first commentator with me, he was like the funny guy, would like to talk about how fat some of the fighters were. And I thought it was hilarious that he just didn't care. So I would do stuff like that. And looking back, I was really just like kind of mimicking him and copycatting him. And I don't really do that anymore. But I did that even after he stopped commentating. I still did like the fat shame jokes for a while. And I'm like, this is not, I don't know. I'm either not Cody or I just don't think it's funny. So that's probably like the cringiest thing.
And you still have funny calls to this day. I know it was Cage Snyder 28 fight night in the flats, the hoodie, you're wearing it right now. When you were, I can't remember the fighter, but his nickname was Sugar Free. Do you care to say what the call was?
But yeah, he was a 125er. He's a 125-pound fighter. And I said it wasn't a boring fight. It was an incredible fight. It was just the same stuff happening the entire fight. It was dominant wrestling. And then those spots, you can't, it gets so boring. Oh, another takedown. Oh, he's dominating on top. So I'm like trying to find something to say. His nickname's Sugar Free. I said, if I was sugar free, I would probably weigh 125 pounds. Another part of that too, and if you know me, you know this is true. When I get tired, I'm like an 8-year-old at a sleepover where I'm like slap happy. And I'm a grown man. And that event was going so long because of the rain delay, and the pro fights were longer fights. So I was just slap happy. And I said, yeah, if I was sugar free, I'd probably be 125 pounds too. That's probably one of my favorite calls. One of my more favorite like funny calls for sure.
Yeah, I loved it. I was sitting next to you at the time, and I was like having a hard time staying composed, knowing that you have a hot mic right next to me, and I don't want my laughter to be picked up on the broadcast. And then like later on, I think 2 fights later, the Mudbug call came up. You looked up what Ben Williford's nickname was, and you said that on the broadcast too. So they're unique, and I think that's such an important part of working in media. We both know that it's so important to be unique. Sure, you can grab inspiration from people, but it's hard to make it in this game as a replica of someone else. Was it difficult for you at first to find your own style, or was it natural starting off just being Alex Henry?
I tried to be the apotheosis of a great commentator. I tried to be that. I tried to be the John Anik. And what I realized is Alex Henry, being Alex Henry, is a much better commentator than Alex Henry trying to be John Anik. So at first, I didn't have it. But I started to get more comfortable. If you've never, if you're not, people don't think about this, Jake. If you watch football, you watch a long baseball game, basketball game, broadcast at most might be 2.5 hours of hot mic where you're talking for at most 2.5 hours. It's probably going to be less than 2 though. In MMA, your like minimum commentating is probably like 4 hours. And if you've never commentated before, saying the right thing, not slipping up, not being an idiot for 4 hours is hard. So it was easy for me to realize early on that me trying to be this great commentator, this picture perfect broadcaster was not what I was supposed to be. And I kind of fell into Alex being Alex. And I think that how big my personality was and how much I was trying to be separate back then with the mullet, with how I dressed, with stuff like that, also kind of did help me fall into that. And having job security. I knew that I was going to commentate for like 3 or 4 events. Like I knew for a fact that was kind of, not that it was signed on a contract or anything. That's just what people had talked about. They said, we're going to give you a shot, and having the security made me understand, well, you know what, I can experiment a little bit and find what's right for me. So yeah.
You mentioned John Anik there. Were there some other figures in MMA media or potentially even wrestling media as well that maybe you took some inspiration from and helped mold who we all know and love in the Caged Thunder booth today?
You know, not that it happened early on, because he's not one of my favorites, and I know like the MMA fighters that listen to this show will hate me because MMA fighters love Joe Rogan's commentating, like a lot of them. I think it's okay. I've kind of fallen into more of a Joe Rogan commentating more lately, though, in terms of finding something unique to say every now and then. That's what he's really good at, and I admire that. But my early on broadcasting heroes, none of them are from MMA. Jerry the King Lawler was my favorite commentator growing up, and he is very goofy, and he is very loud. He's very loud. My biggest inspiration is Joey Styles, which was ECW's commentator, and he was very loud. And what people don't know about Joey Styles is he commentated by himself 90% of the shows. It was just Joey Styles commentating. So he was able to keep something entertaining for the length of a program by himself. And I love that. And not that I've ever felt like I was by myself. And I'm not going to say any names, but some of these guys I've commentated with are booty cheeks. And I literally did feel like I'm by myself. And I'm talking about guys who are veteran fighters. And they should never be near a mic for the rest of their life. And I really felt that by myself. That's one. But the big one with Joey Styles is he has a call. And not everybody has a call. There's the bang call. Bang! Curry with the 3, bang! That's a call. Joey Styles would say, "Oh my gosh!" And I loved that call because it was so sickening. He sounded so sick. He's like, "Oh, I can't believe it." And I like that nasty kind of call. And I was at a broadcasting class in Baltimore where I was learning from the Baltimore Orioles play-by-play commentator, and I had asked him, I lose my voice a lot because I like to yell. Joey Styles, Jerry Lawler. How could I not lose my voice over, again, a 4-hour broadcast, sometimes longer? And again, people don't realize this. MMA commentators are better than other commentators because we have to do it for longer. So we're a lot better. And it's a lot harder. So you lose your voice if you're yelling for 5 hours. Anybody will. He said you have to rate it. Okay. Is this like a 6 out of 10 level call? 7 out of 10 level? 8 out of 10? 9 out of 10? 10 out of 10? Those are your big knockout calls. And I say dear Lord a lot. I'll say, "Oh, dear Lord." Like, that's like an Alex Henry slang, you know, not that I'm the one who invented it, but I say it a lot. And, you know, "Oh my gosh," and "dear Lord's" kind of similar. So I remember I wanted to make my catchphrase "dear Lord." I don't know if anybody knows that. Probably not. But I know it. My wife knows it. And that's all that matters. But Devin Watkins laid down one of the nicest knockouts on Trey Smith I've ever seen. And it's probably one of my favorite calls. And I go, "Dear Lord!" And Brandon Billiter's going, "Whoa!" And I loved that call. And that was like my I was in my inner Joey Styles came out. So all that to say, my inspiration is a random ECW commentator that most people probably don't know.
Yeah, there you have it, man. So I know the Dear Lord call is one that is unique to you, and I've known that is your specialty there, that or at least your your phrase that you like to use. And you mentioned that Devin Watkins knockout. Do you think that is your favorite call across the 15 plus events you've worked?
Yeah, it probably is my favorite. It was probably still to this day top 3 knockout I've ever seen, ever in person in cage side. And at the time it was number 1. It still arguably is number 1. And I did it. Because the other thing is I kept forgetting to do it. Now my problem is, and we've talked about this because we commentate together, I try not to say it too much. I want to make sure I reserve it. The one UFC commentator that I'm just drawing a blank on his name, people got tired of him because he always would say, "It is all over." And anytime the fight ended, he said, "It is all over." And at the time back then that was fire, but he said it too much. So that was my Dear Lord call. It was probably my best Dear Lord call because I've been close to losing my voice because I don't have a high pitch voice, but I don't have a low pitch voice. I have like a grown man puberty voice. So I got to make sure I got to commit every time, and I committed and I didn't forget. That's probably my favorite call. At least in terms of best sounding call, that's probably my favorite call that I've done that I thought sounded really good.
You talked earlier about having to work with guest commentators or your second or third man, especially early on, who maybe made you feel like you were actually alone on this broadcast. And maybe that's the answer. But what do you find the most like challenging aspect of being an MMA commentator?
That's a good question. I think this, I'm surrounded with fighters. I wish that I wasn't surrounded with fighters. Because when you're, and I'm surrounded with people that are obsessed with fighting. The truth is, with any sport, and think about this if you're listening, NFL, NBA, football, basketball, doesn't matter. When you listen to the mainstream commentators, they try to explain the main color and play-by-play. They are explaining it as if you don't know. They're not giving you a tutorial, but they're explaining it as if you wouldn't know that was a touchdown. You don't know that it's now 2nd and 7. You don't realize that was a penalty and they're going to the free throw. That's why you have an analyst. And a lot of the time, if you notice, now we have a full third analyst. In MMA, it's common to do that. But in other sports, you have your main 2. And if something's really, really confusing and it's important to the game, and you're a baseball fan, so there's a lot of weird rules in baseball. The 2 commentators don't know what's going on. They ask the analyst. The analyst knows everything, and they're going to say, this is what's happening, so the person at home knows. My biggest struggle is having this insecurity that people think I don't know what I'm talking about because I keep it basic. But really, that's what a good broadcaster is supposed to do. But all I have is a lot of fighters watch their fights back, and fighters watch their teammates' fights back, and I get this kind of like insecurity that, they might not think I know what I'm talking about. That's a big struggle. And then I'd say the other big struggle is making sure that you pick your spots. And as the lead, that's kind of how we use that term at Cage Thunder. I don't know what other MMA promotions do, but I've been considered the lead ever since the beginning. My first show with Cody Anthony, I was the lead. Cody Anthony was like the second guy, and I was going to lead him. So I want to make sure that I'm leading my team in a good direction, and I like when I have a good team who trust my leadership too, and that they know how I work, so we can work as a good team together. Those are probably the 2 most difficult things for me. Well, and to say, too, on the first one, it's because I don't want to overstep on explaining something just to sound good. It sounds good when I'm explaining the bare minimum to somebody who might not know. Because people who watch family or pay-per-views are family members, they're friends of family, they're friends of the fighter, they're co-workers. They're not UFC, MMA fans a lot of the time. So I want them to enjoy their $33 pay-per-view that they paid for, and I want to make sure that I can explain what's going on.
Can I add a third challenge to the job?
Sure.
Both serious and jokingly, knowing you, being able to pronounce these names correctly.
Oh, yeah, awful. Awful. I'm awful with the names. I do a little better at Cage Thunder because they put money in my wallet, and I want to make sure it's extra good. But yeah, knowing how to pronounce some of these names. Some of the time, I'll ask a fighter how they pronounce their name. They'll tell me that Jake Digman will ask them how they pronounce their name. They must tell Jake Digman a completely different thing, or vice versa. And it's like, do you even know how to pronounce your name? My name's Alex Henry. Can't mess that up. But like, I don't know.
For sure. Definitely early on, it was a challenge. I loved recording those UFC podcasts with you,
Oh my
and
God.
I would just make fun of you so hard for the way you would pronounce these names. That was a good time. If you were to show someone that was completely unaware of any Ohio MMA fight, which one would it be?
If you're completely unaware of Ohio MMA and you want to know how these Ohio MMA guys get down, no recency bias, RJ Harris, Jeremy Riley, there was drama within the fight. Within the fight happening, there was drama. It was back and forth. It was a lot of action. And it shows, that RJ Harris is not an independent, but he's a guy who didn't really have, from what I understand, a good home gym at the point he was transitioning around. And he kind of came almost up as an independent. And then you have a Jeremy, who's a guy who started his career losing, as a loser, Jeremy, if you're listening to this. And now he's come back to fight the Giant because he's a beast now. And those guys just put on a performance. And I would show somebody that fight, and I'd say this is a representation of how these Ohio MMA guys get down. I mean, it's not going to always be that crazy, but this is how we do it.
I can vouch for that one too. And I knew you were going to say a Jeremy Riley fight. I had a suspicion it was either that one or the Matt Beal one, right?
Yeah, Matt Beal, Jeremy Riley was definitely a barn burner. Man, he's had so many good fights.
He's responsible
Jeremy has.
for putting some blood on your scorebook and clothes too, right?
If you want to know part about commentary, you have the best seat in the house next to the referee. And Jeremy, it was a summer show, and we had just gotten black polos, and I said, I'm going to wear some white shorts with this polo. What an idiot I was for that. Because Jeremy Riley and it's all over me and Chris Porter, and I think Matt Adams was actually commentating that night, and we got blood all over the table. And yeah, he's gotten a lot of blood on me. I've gotten a lot of fighters' blood on me, and I actually, oddly enough, back in the day, we had like these paper bout sheets. We have bout sheets now, but they're much fancier. They're much nicer. But I've kept every bout sheet I ever had because I'd like take whole notes on them. A lot of them have blood on them still. And my wife thinks that's pretty gross that I would keep them. But I actually think it's really cool because if you buy a canvas piece from the UFC, you want a canvas piece with the blood on it. You don't want a canvas piece that's just like blank, half of a monster logo. You want the blood. So
in the moment when the blood is spraying on you, though, do you feel like that's gross, or does it just get you amped up that much more on the broadcast?
Yeah, Devin Watkins and Mike LaFay were fighting, and Devin Watkins just laid a slobber knocker, also a commentary reference, on Mike LaFay, and he had blood shoot all over him, and that's the worst I've ever had blood on me, was that, Mike LaFay's blood all over me, and I went silent for like 30 seconds because it was so gross, so I mute my mic, and I was just wiping blood off me. Chris Porter's girlfriend was cage side at the time, and she had a little Purell bottle, so she's like getting me Purell, and I'm like wiping this blood off, and my water that's really important during broadcast. I'm like spraying a little water, and it was gross. I mean, that was disgusting.
Once again, this is Alex Henry with us on Forged in Ohio. Let's talk about things you do at Cage Thunder and Ohio MMA in general, aside from commentating fights. You're involved in matchmaking for Cage Thunder. I know that's still pretty fresh for you, but what does the opportunity to match fights in Ohio mean to you?
It means a lot because these guys are really talented, and these fighters, they don't know it, but they've helped me a lot. They've given me something that I thought I'd never have, and that's respect in a community where I really sometimes feel like I don't deserve the respect. And I've gotten so much respect from these guys, and I've gotten so much respect from Cage Thunder that I almost feel that it's like a duty of mine to give these fighters good fights and to give Cage Thunder good fights. And the fact that I started from a free intern and now that they would allow me to match fights alongside a pretty cool guy is pretty surreal for me. And it's hard. It's hard, but you know what? A lot of these people keep telling me how hard it is, and I get it's hard, but I sometimes wonder how much work ethic some of these guys lack. Not that I'm like the hardest worker in the room, but you know, you just gotta like try to message some fighters and see if they fight. Much easier said than done. But I want to say, and it's part of what I do, is I have a passion for it, and people use the expression, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. But I personally think that passion beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. It doesn't sound as cool because there's not like the hard work hard, but my passion fuels me so much that I can grind and I don't even feel like I was working. Like I've put in hours into matchmaking and I'll get done and I don't even realize how much time just went by. I'm like, holy crap. But it's just because I care so much, and I'll get stressed thereafter. You know, like I'll hit like the after high. But yeah, I'm really honored that Randy and Cage Thunder would trust me enough to, and now I'm matching the Canton Civic Center show, our biggest show of the year, our Super Bowl. It's crazy.
Yeah, for sure, man. You talked about serving the promotion, serving the fighters, but what's your goal as co-matchmaker for for Cage Thunder?
Yeah, I just want to put on good fights. I want to put fights on that put people in their seats and that put fighters in a position to continue to succeed and to test themselves. What I've noticed, and I knew this before I matchmake, so it's not like it was a huge surprise to me, but fighters don't always want to take the next step. And their coaches don't always want them to take the next step. They want to baby them. And the fighters want to be babied. And it's crazy because they're fighters. And you just have this idea that they're stoic and they'll take anybody. And some of them will. Jeremy Riley, he'll fight anybody. And he has that warrior spirit. I want to put on fights that are going to test you. Okay, you're a 3-0. I'm going to give you a hard fight now. You're within title contention, depending on the promotion. Cage Thunder sometimes being one of them. You could fight for a title at 3-0. So I want to put fighters in a position where they can test themselves, and that their coaches know that's where they at. And then again, I want to put fans in the seat, and I want to make fights that make sense. So many times, and it's hard for me right now because I'm so new. But so many times you think, who put this fight together? This fight sucks. Why are these guys fighting each other? You know, he's a wrestler. They both suck. This is going to be so boring. I feel that way. I don't care to say it. I don't think I'm going to lose my job because I said that. It's just true. I'll say the quiet part out loud. Nobody wants to watch two 0-0 wrestler. Sorry, not even 0-0 because who knows. But nobody wants to watch a 1-2 and a 1 and an 0-1 who are both wrestlers, get on the ground and cuddle with each other for 9 minutes. Nobody does. So something I've really learned is like the fighters, again, my critics are the fighters, not like actual fans. It's not like, other sports because we're in such a small community. They'll always say, man, wrestling is a strong, important part of the game. It's so valuable. I agree. I wrestled for 10 years. I think wrestling is the most important part of MMA. I think wrestling can be enjoyable to watch. Jordan Tag, Devin Watkins. I have huge respect. I like both of those guys. Jordan Tag used wrestling in a dominant way to his advantage to make the fight better in his favor. And in doing so, it was entertaining. Sometimes guys just wrestle and they'll hold you. And then, to prove themselves, MMA fighters who are amateur in the state of Ohio will come on Facebook or social media and say, no, that fight wasn't boring. That was just that was good, smart, high-level grappling. And if you don't know, then you don't know anything about MMA, and I know because I'm a fighter. And sometimes it really, I was talking to Randy Jarvis about this, the part owner of Cage Thunder. Sometimes it can just be boring. So I want to try to make sure, if he's going to tell me it's boring, I've watched more fights cage side than anybody I've ever met in my entire life thinks it's boring. Sometimes it can just be boring. So I want to put on good fights, Jake.
A few more minutes here with Alex Henry, the voice and co-matchmaker of Cage Thunder. You also have experience cornering a fighter in Jonathan Hartshorn in July. How cool is that experience for you?
Deep cut. That's a deep cut. Got to get my chalky milk in there. But yeah, I got such an odd experience. We had our commentary cut for that show. It happened. Not the call I would have made. Personally, I think wanting to watch a fight back on YouTube, it's still good to have a broadcast to watch the fight back. And now those fights don't have commentary on them, but it happened. And I am a follower of a leader, and I trust my leadership, and that's what happened. And I said, well, you know what? If I'm not commentating, I want to do something. A fighter friend of mine was going to be cornering Jonathan Hartshorn, and I said, can I help corner him? I think I can help him. He's a guy who's struggling. He has a struggling record, and it might just be some confidence, and if maybe I can talk enough to get him confident enough, maybe I can help. And Apex allowed me to go into their facilities to help work with him a couple times, and even the other fighter that helped corner him was Roman Parabek, and Roman is an excellent wrestler. He had a great wrestling background. He's a top-ranked fighter in the state of Ohio. He's a 4-0. And even I would do something, and Roman, he'll tell you how it is. He'd say, oh yeah, I would have never thought to teach it like that because it's just so second nature to me. And I feel like a lot of the coaches, that's probably how it is. A lot of it is so second nature to them. But I could understand something on a simpler level, probably because I analyze stuff on a simpler level to explain it on a simpler level. And so I helped him in that. And then I just remember it's night of the fight, and nobody was holding mitts for him to help warm him up at this point. And I'm like, Jonathan, let's hit mitts. And I got Dusty Schaefer, Branson Price. These are like the best of the best. Like Dusty Schaefer kicked me in the leg one time, and I couldn't walk the next day. And they're just watching me hit mitts, and they don't say anything about it. And I'm like, that was a very cool respect that I have. And I do have some combat sports background. I've never fought in the cage. He didn't win, but it was fun. It was fun. I remember my youth wrestling coach, who was there for Jackson Dougherty, was in the crowd. And the first time he saw me that night was walking out to corner a fighter. And I thought, how cool I must look to him. One of his old wrestlers now cornering a fighter. My guy lost. Maybe after that he was like, never mind, Alex sucks. But it was cool. I cornered against David Leisure, who didn't have his corner because his teammates were fighting that same weekend, and it was Dave Graff in Leisure's as a step up, where I have an immense amount of respect for Dave Graff. A lot of the MMA community doesn't. My rule in MMA community is if you treat me well, I'll treat you back well. And I have gotten that respect from a lot of coaches. And Dave's always been nothing but nice to me. And I told him earlier in the week, I'm like, we're going to corner against each other, dude. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And when I was cornering, I didn't know what to say. Roman's in the cage. I'm outside of the cage. I'm looking at Leisure, and he is tired. And if he's listening to this, he knows dang well he was tired. And I say, Jonathan, he's tired. And David Leisure goes, oh, yeah, I'm so tired. And I said, actually, Jonathan, he said that he's really tired. And Dave died laughing. And it's like, we're trying to have these guys fight each other. And of course, I'm making everybody laugh. I can't take it seriously. So that was a pretty cool time. Yeah.
Is that something we could see you do again, being in the corner of a fighter?
Yes, I will corner many more fighters in the future.
Interesting. A nice little tease there. Last one for you, man. And it's the most important question I'll ask. Do we ever see Alex Henry in the cage one day competing himself?
Dude, good question. So many people want to see me get punched in the face in a cage. Like, it's not even funny. Like, I think a lot more people like me than don't. I'm not sure. But absolutely a lot of people want to punch me in the face and want to see me get punched in the face. I think I've sparred with some good fighters. And I've trained Muay Thai, and I have a really good wrestling background. I think it could happen. Am I planning on it anytime soon? Nope. My wife would kill me. But am I open to it if the opportunity made itself possible in life? Yeah, I would fight. And not just to finally have that confidence to say, well, I did fight, so I can't commentate now. Because that's what it used to been. But I actually kind of have an itch. You see me walking around, I get the memes where it's like the one friend that shadow boxes every time he sees you. People send those to me because I walk around and I'm always punching my students. I'm like sending bad habits to my students in class because they'll walk around shadow boxing because they see me doing it, and now I got to yell at them. So I do have that in me where it's like, I kind of want to do this, but probably not anytime soon. Maybe never.
And all it takes is that itch, man. I think that's all I have for you, my friend. Is there anything you'd like to shout out or anyone you'd like to thank here at the back end of the podcast?
Huge shout out to WZIP FM for giving me an opportunity to do broadcasting. Huge shout out to Chaparrals. Something that's interesting is my mom passed away when I was in the 8th grade. But my whole life, she loved to play bingo at Chaparral's on Friday night. She loved to play bingo. And that was like her thing. That's their bingo hall, too. And now I work in the same place that she used to have so much fun. And I think that's really special. That I kind of like that invisible line theory, kind of, is like there at Chaparral. So thanks to Chaparrals, thanks to Cage Thunder, Norm, Randy, Eric, who allows me to do video editing, even though he knows so many guys better than me, lets me anyway, and I appreciate that. And shout out to my wife for putting up with me as well, because she doesn't like fighting at all. She could care less about fighting, and she falls asleep every time she watches it. And all I do is talk about what's for dinner. Hey, guess what about this fighting stuff? And that's it. And so she's awesome. And then thank you to you, Jake, for having me on week 100.
Of course, man. Thanks again, Alex, for joining me on the show. It was pretty special to have you on Forged in Ohio during this super cool week for the podcast. You knew before anyone else that the OHIO chant would be a part of every episode, and now it is your turn. So, OH.
Ayo.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate the time. I can't wait for that December card you're booking for Cage Thunder, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
Peace out, guys. Thank you, Jake.
That was Alex Henry. He's the voice of Cage Thunder. He's a master of video editing and a co-matchmaker of the promotion as well. If you've bought Cage Thunder pay-per-views, you've heard his voice. If you've watched any Cage Thunder fights, perhaps on YouTube, you've heard his voice. And if you've ever fought for the promotion, there's no doubt that you've heard this voice. I hope you all enjoyed this unique episode of Forged in Ohio. It's officially what I'm calling the third leg of the week of 100 episodes for Forged in Ohio. We've got two incredible pro fighters on Monday and Tuesday, now an incredible media personality in combat sports, and we'll wrap up the week with two more pro fighters. To stay locked in on all Forged in Ohio content, make sure you give the show a follow on both Instagram and Facebook. I know we can also get more subscribers on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching the show, please subscribe and like the video. If you're like me and prefer to listen to podcasts, then make sure you're following the feed and downloading these episodes as well. Thank you all for watching or tuning in. I've been your host, Jake Murren, and I'll see you tomorrow for the fourth leg of the week of 100 episodes.